One of the things I think he already started to do last year that he has to continue to do is establish himself as the leader of this football team. And for a rookie, the veterans were blown away by his demeanor, by his presence. That's step one. He obviously has to continue to improve as a quarterback, getting Devontae Smith to throw the ball to, and then hoping the Jalen Reagors of the world have better years. That'll certainly help. But there were mistakes that Carson Wentz made that Jalen Hurts didn't when he first came in, starting with the Arizona game, the New Orleans game. He has to continue to build on that.
When you hear on 365 with my partner John McClellan, we're going to go Eagles in depth the next show. Stick around with us, John. I'm glad to say that we are not the place that people come to retire. After guys get a new location, a new working outlet, they jump aboard with us. Let's see who we had of late. Paul Domowitz came on. Les Bowen came on. And now a guy who's been covering the Birds for KYW and WIP for years, and he's going to find a new spot to cover him for this upcoming season. Ed Benkin joins us here on Birds 365. Eddie, how are you?
Good, gentlemen. I feel pretty flattered hearing the guys who retired and stepped in before me, so I feel pretty optimistic now. It looks like I got a pretty good lead to go forward with.
Yeah, it's good to see. It is disappointing, though, because I see so many guys, and that's the reality of our industry with last time Nick Biero as well, who comes on the show from the Allentown Morning Call. You've had a long run here in Philadelphia. Everybody knows I'm Ed Benkin. I've got to get you to do that on the show at the end here. But, it's been for you. It's been Sixers, Flyers, Phillies, Eagles. So you've seen it all in this town over the past 2 decades. Kind of tell us the difference between the passion of the Eagles fans versus everybody else, because Philadelphia fans are passionate, but let's be honest, the Eagles are far and above everything else in this town.
Right, and I think there's that passion across the board, but because of the intensity of the Eagles fans and what the NFL means, not just to Philadelphia, but to the country, it's a little more intense here, not to mention the fact that when someone like the Dallas Cowboys come to town, it's more intense maybe than any other rivalry with any sports team in the city. It's great to be able to, when you're covering the team, get a sense of that. You realize the importance of what it means to everybody and that passion. And we all kind of wondered after the Super Bowl, well, maybe will things change a little bit? Will people be satisfied that they got their one? Well, it doesn't seem that way, judging by the passion, what we're hearing with everybody, and that's good. And that's one of the things that makes this job so much fun is you realize just how much people care about this team.
Eddie, I'm glad you say it makes this job this much fun, because I'm going to ask you to kind of paint that picture for us, for our Birds 365 fans. Your job is to get as much useful information out there, add a little opinion where you can, about the teams that you cover. And as John mentioned, you covered all of them here in Philadelphia over the last couple of years. Give me a comparison between the Eagles and everybody else in the way they allowed you to do your job, the way you thought best served your audience, to be able to get that information, to be able to let people know it's actually happening on and or off the field with the organization. How did covering the Eagles compare to covering the other teams in how they allowed you to do your job, how they let you get what you needed to get done to serve your listeners?
Well, first of all, and this is without any disrespect to any of the other sports or teams, the NFL allows more media than a lot of the other teams do because there's such a demand. And John, you and I know, being in that locker room so much, there's more people in the locker room at an Eagles practice during the week than at a Flyers game or a Sixers game during the week. So there is that demand. The people have the appetite for the NFL in general 24/7. That's why we have all these shows during the week. And that's why there's an NFL network. Jody's
Birds 365. Thank you very much.
Jody's quite, you guys are quite familiar with that as well. It's a 24/7 passion, even in the off season. People are talking about the draft. People are talking about training camp even before you get there. And that's what makes it, I think, a little more unique. So because of that, there's a lot more coverage allowed. And we're in the locker rooms, and I think John can attest to this too. We've been very fortunate. A lot of these players we've covered the last several years, and I tell this to my class at Rowan, my sports broadcasting class, it's a business. It's business. You go into your office, you talk to people in your office. we were able to build a lot of strong business relationships with the Brandon Grahams and the Jason Kelsey. So the combination of the appetite for media for the NFL, the way the Eagles allow us to get into the locker rooms and do our job, and their PR staff and the players, and building those relationships really made that a little more unique and allowed me to get a lot of that information, because you may build some of those relationships and find out some things that maybe you wouldn't have found out if you didn't have time to work with some of the other teams.
Yeah, and that was what was so disappointing about last season. Obviously, everything turned into the Zoom virtual world. What we're doing right now, essentially, and we'll see, things are going to shift. We're going to have on-field access at training camp at least, and they're still haggling over what's going to happen during the regular season. But so things are getting slightly back to normal. It's kind of difficult question because we're all apart. We've all have been apart for so long, but you've gotten back into it with other teams at least a little bit. Do you sense there's not as much juice this time around? I mean, it's a team coming off a bad season, number one, and then you shipped away from Doug Peterson, Carson Wentz, so you have a lot of uncertainty. Do you sense a little less juice this time around?
A little bit, only because of the fact that even though people could see the warning signs last year, when you go back to the Super Bowl year, there was a sense the year after, hey, from the fans, let's try to repeat. The year after that, let's at least get the division title, get to the playoffs. So it was a step down year after year, but there was always a sense, hey, this team could still be playing football in January, even before the start of last year, as bad as the division was. And I think everyone understands it. It's an evil word for the Eagles, rebuilding, retooling, however you want to phrase it, that this team is obviously, you can at least say, in transition right now. New coach, new starting quarterback, who started at the end of last year, obviously, and a lot of changes. And the process, I think, of starting to move out some of those veterans has happened over the last couple of years, and you'll see a more intense movement of that in the next couple of years with some of those Super Bowl core guys. So I think the combination of that and everybody in general still recovering from this awful pandemic maybe kind of changes the dynamic a little bit going in.
All right. We are in the downtime of the National Football League calendar. Finished up all off-season workouts, waiting the couple more weeks before camp kicks in. So the only thing that we have to discuss is our prognostications, what we think is going to happen based on what happened last year, based on what you think is going to be stepping up or stepping back. I need to ask you about one particular Eagle player, Ed. I've been really surprised by those who are generating opinions during this downtime on what others outside of Philadelphia think of Miles Sanders. I thought he had a pretty damn good year last year. At 5.3 yards per carry, he was the fifth best running back in the National Football League. 5.3 is the fifth best number. And yes, you can't compare total yards because some teams run it a hell of a lot more. And Miles Sanders wasn't the only back who got the ball here in Philadelphia. So I think average yards per carry is the best way to decide what kind of a season a guy had. And at 5.3 yards per carry, he's fifth best in the league. No one has him ranked as a top 5 back. No one has him ranked as a top 10 back. Pro Football Focus has got him 19. And Maurice Jones-Drew, ex-NFL stud running back, now analyst for the NFL Network, ranked him deep in the 20s of NFL running backs. Are they dismissing and disparaging Miles Sanders in their evaluation issue?
I think they are in some ways. I think the bigger concern, and this is based on last year, was he was banged up a lot. And players get hurt in the NFL where you have an injury that knocks you out for 6 weeks. But when you have a guy, especially his size, with those nagging injuries, a hamstring here, an ankle here that doesn't go away, I think that's where the concern came from. I agree with you that I think a healthy Miles Sanders is just fine and dandy in the Eagles' backfield in this era. See Bills Chiefs AFC Championship, where you're not going to throw the ball that much anyway. But you can get enough out of a Miles Sanders, not just as a back, but almost as importantly, catching the ball out of the backfield, that, yes, as long as he can stay healthy, you can say that about anybody, and maybe you need someone else to help take the tread off the tires. This isn't Saquon Barkley in New York or Ezekiel Elliott coming back in Dallas, who's going to carry a heavy workload. That would be the only concern, maybe the durability side with his size and the pounding he's taking in the NFL.
Ed, before I get to any players, I got to talk about the head coach. I got to talk about your first impressions, because we haven't had you on the show before, of Nick Sirianni. Now, nationally, it's not good, and we all know, we should know, from Doug Peterson's first press conference. Everybody thought Doug was going to be a disaster. And all of a sudden, this team's winning the Super Bowl. So it's not meaningful when people make those splash judgments on a guy after, and this wasn't even a real press conference, it was a virtual press conference. So understanding it's not fair, there is kind of a rah-rah and whatever you want to call it. Very excitable guy. And that's going to rub some people the wrong way if you don't have success. Do you think that's something to be concerned about, or is it overblown a little bit?
I think it's overblown a little bit. I do think that all that rah-rah stuff is great. You have to go out and perform. It's great that he has all this energy. The first press conference was not a great impression, but as you said, I'm not going to judge the guy's tenure on one press conference. Like any coach, everyone from Rich Kotite to Andy Reid, I say give him a chance before you judge. One of the things that impressed me with him early, though, was when he came to the players with all this talk about what's going to happen with OTAs, what's going to be mandatory, and he said, everyone, I want to listen, I want to learn, let's work something out so we can get this done together. And Brandon Graham and Jason Kelsey talked about how he came to the middle, how he compromised. So how he does in the field ultimately will be how he's judged. But he took a big first step in getting that rapport with the players, particularly the veterans who he needs to get everybody to buy in. That's a big first step going into training camp. So the jury will be out until he starts coaching, but at least from the player relationship standpoint, I think that was a huge step in the offseason.
And here's one thing that I don't know, and I don't know if you know either, but I'll ask you to give me your best guess scenario and or healthy speculation. There was a lot of talk, a lot of rumors about how hands-on Jeffrey was during the Doug Peterson administration here in Philadelphia, that Doug would hear about it on days after wins, that they didn't throw the football enough with his Monday morning meetings with Jeff Lurie. And I'm sure that reporting was as accurate as it could be. Even though he won a Super Bowl, Doug was a coach who had a pretty good thumb on his activities from both his owner and his general manager. So now you have a new guy who's never coached a day in the National Football League. And if the members above him were hand pushing the head coach in certain directions, you've got to believe the new guy is going to be directed and guided even more so going forward. But they let him pick his coaching staff. If you go down the Eagles coaching staff, almost to a man, every one of them has some kind of tie to Nick Sirianni. They never did that with Doug Peterson. Doug was dictated to as to what his coaching staff was going to be. He was good enough to keep a whole bunch of Chip Kelly guys. And then when he wanted to make moves, they said, no, that's not happening. We all know the famous, he's sticking around. He's going to be our offense quarter. And 48 hours later, he's fired. So we know what happened. We know how it shook out there. It was dictated to him. Do we read into the fact that he had so much say, Nick Sirianni, in putting together this coaching staff, that maybe part of that transition that Jeff Lurie referenced is we're going to give the coach a chance to coach rather than micromanage things from behind the scenes? Am I just like whistling for Dixie here and being overly optimistic that they're going to give Nick Sirianni a chance to actually coach his football team?
Well, if the reporting is accurate, and we feel like it is certainly with the people who are reporting it, I'm not so sure he'll have that total freedom. Maybe Jeffrey Lurie is realizing, okay, we have to loosen the chains a little bit here. But look, they could have brought in someone with a lot more clout, with a lot more experience as head coach, who they would have realized they could not do what they reportedly did to Doug Peterson. So I think there's a fine line, because if you're Jeffrey Lurie and you're Howie Roseman, you want to give the new coach a chance to build with the staff, to build with the players. And there has to be some hands off there if what was told before is true with the way they dictated things with Doug. I think part of what happened with Doug, yes, there was some of that controlling, but after the Super Bowl, sometimes guys kind of, for lack of a better term, start smelling themselves a little bit and feel like, okay, we know what we're doing. We're in charge, Doug. This is how this is going to work. So I think there will be some leeway with Nick Sirianni. Now, if they start off at 4-8, we'll see how much of that leeway remains to be seen going forward.
You know, Ed, I've been doing this preview series for Sports Illustrated, kind of ranking the NFC East at each position. Just got done with the coaches. And I heard this again from a former AFC personnel guy, and I've heard it a number of times. And they make the comparisons, and I'm going to give it to you, and I want to get your thoughts on it. Sean McVay had Wade Phillips. Doug Peterson had Jim Schwartz when he became a first-time head coach. Matt Nagy had Vic Fangio. On and on. Even last year, Joe Judge had Jason Garrett, who was a longtime coach of the Cowboys, obviously. Nick Sirianni doesn't have anybody. It seems to me his inner circle, the closest guys to him are Shane Steichen and Kevin Patullo. And it was interesting. He was explaining Kevin Patullo, when we got him, was explaining how close he was to Nick Sirianni. He sounded like his right-hand man when he got into the NovaCare complex. Do they need a veteran sounding board? Is this possible to even work with no experience?
Is it possible? Yes, because we don't know if these assistants, just like the head coach, could turn out to be an outstanding staff. But you would like that veteran. Even when Andy Reid's rookie year came about, he brought in Rod Dowhauer. He brought in a couple of veteran coaches. You would like to see that. Now, maybe this group grows together and becomes an outstanding staff. But like you said, there's not that established coach. Jim Schwartz had his critics. He had his people praising him, but there's no second-guessing the fact that he came in here with experience. He had outstanding run as a defensive coordinator after his tenure with the Lions. He doesn't have that right now. And there is going to be that time, as much as I said, Nick Sirianni's established himself with the players, not just with the X's and O's. Every team in the NFL has the part of the year where the ship's rocky a little bit, and you need that steadying influence. A lot of that's going to have to be the veteran players since, as you said, there's no one in that room. I would have liked to have seen at least one veteran coach just as a sounding board in there. That's not there. And so I think the biggest test with the staff is going to be when the waters are a little rocky this year to kind of get things refocused.
And as a guy who's been in the Eagle locker room for years, and we all know last year was not the case because of COVID situation and everyone doing things virtually. So I'm taking you back to previous seasons. Zach Ertz was a main contributor on his team and a big part of the Super Bowl winning championship squad in 2017. He and the Eagles are at loggerheads. John, I am assuming yourself don't believe he's going to be back there. We'll see how it shakes out. How it shakes out will be taken in by all of the current Eagle players. And guys like McMullen, McDonald, and Benkin will have opinions on how the Eagles handled it. Did they do it right? Did they do the right thing by the players? Zach Ertz, who someday may be in the Eagles Ring of Honor. How much did the Eagles have to worry about that? How much is Howie Roseman considering what will the rest of my roster think on how I handle Zach Ertz? Should he just do what's best for the team in his eyes, just in relation to Zach Ertz and what you can get for him and the salary cap? Or does he have to take the opinion of other Eagle players on the rosters into consideration?
I think he has to make what in his mind is the best move for the Philadelphia Eagles. The players may be upset if Zach Ertz is released or traded somewhere. That's the business of the NFL, and we've seen it in that locker room. We saw Malcolm Jenkins exit after the season a couple of years ago. We see veterans go out the door. It's part of the business of the NFL. It certainly has worked in New England, among the many things like cutting a Lawyer Malloy right before the start of a season. It is the business side of it, so the players may be upset, and the players may say, well, we really wanted Zach Ertz back. Why didn't you have this meeting to patch everything up and bring him back in? But then it's time to go play football. Then it's time to hit the practice for training camp, get the first day with pads. So I don't think it will have a long-term effect with this group as far as what they decide to do with Zach Ertz. Having said that, if, as we believe, he is not going to be here, get this taken care of and get this over with now. Training camp starts July 27th. You don't want this to linger. You don't want this to fester. You don't want to have Dallas Goedert asking questions and answering questions about when is Zach Ertz going to be traded. If you're going to move forward, do it as quickly as you possibly can.
All right, Ed, I feel like we buried the lead. The lead with the Philadelphia Eagles is the quarterback, and the quarterback is Jalen Hurts, and we got to see him a little bit at the end of last season. We also look forward to next season. We see the 3 first-round picks. We see the salary cap room that is going to be there after they take sort of that bad gulp of medicine from Carson Wentz. Jalen Hurts is getting 1 year to prove he can be the starting quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles. What can he do to prove that? What does he have to do to prove that, to be the long-term starting quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles?
One of the things I think he already started to do last year that he has to continue to do is establish himself as the leader of this football team. And for a rookie, the veterans were blown away by his demeanor, by his presence. That's step one. He obviously has to continue to improve as a quarterback, getting Devontae Smith to throw the ball to, and then hoping the Jalen Reagors of the world have better years. That'll certainly help. But there were mistakes that Carson Wentz made that Jalen Hurts didn't when he first came in, starting with the Arizona game, the New Orleans game. He has to continue to build on that. There's so many intangibles for a young quarterback. It's not just being able to make the throw. It's knowing when to throw the ball away. It's knowing when to vacate the pocket. We saw glimpses of that. We had kind of the appetizer a little bit. Across the board, his skills have to continue, and he also has to continue to do what he's doing and establish himself in that locker room. I don't think he has to have Patrick Mahomes numbers to stay around next year, but I think he has to do well enough for the Eagles to say, okay, we have a young quarterback in his second year. He took that step forward across the board with all the intangibles as well as his skills. We won some games thanks to him that could have gone either way. We feel comfortable going forward with him next year.
So Ed believes that Jalen Hurts is going to win the competition for starting quarterback for the Philadelphia, because the coach keeps telling us it's a competition. Wink, wink, nod, nod. I want to go to a place where I actually do believe there is a competition, and that's the starting left tackle. We get a bunch of guys on here, and everyone gets to give us their choice of the two. Jeff Stoutland will decide it more so than anybody else. So everyone always wants to hear what Jeff has to say about left tackle, because it's probably going to come down to his call, and it should. We've got Andre Dillard, who was a first-round draft pick, a pick that the Eagles moved up to make Andre Dillard, who's had injury issues and inability to move when they asked him to go to the right side, looked pretty damn bad. But he's back and healthy, and he's at his natural position left tackle against Jordan Mailata, which is one of the best Eagle flyers over the last couple of years. 7th-round pick who's come in and grown before our very eyes. Who's going to win the competition at left tackle, Ed Benkin?
And this is assuming Andre Dillard's healthy, of course. Judging from what I saw last year and what I saw from Andre Dillard before he was shut down, I'm leaning towards Jordan Mailata. Jordan had some rough moments. He had some very good moments last year. And when he had his rough moments, he knew they were rough moments. He corrected his mistakes the best he could. The trajectory continued to go upward, and I think he can continue to get better after pretty much a year of getting that time finally on the football field. Andre Dillard, first of all, he has to be healthy. The thing that concerned me before he was hurt, John knows, we were watching OTAs, we were watching training camp. He didn't look so good. And he has yet to show me anything that makes me think, okay, he not only can be a productive tackle in the NFL, but that he could be the starting left tackle, the blindside spot for somebody in the NFL. Mailata did enough last year to make me say, okay, I've seen what this guy can do. He's gone out there. He's made his mistakes, but he also performed well. There were some games where he played as well as anybody in that position, as we've seen before Jason Peters started to get old and started to get injured. So right now, to me, it's Jordan Mailata's job to lose, because he's got a bit more of a resume right now on the field than Andre Dillard has.
All right. The biggest concern, Ed, with the Philadelphia Eagles seems to be the corner spot opposite Darius Slay. And Darius and Steven Nelson were kind of going back and forth on Twitter a little bit yesterday. By the way, Steven Nelson, his Twitter handle is at Nelson Island. I think he should change that. The expectations, if the Eagles bring in Steven Nelson, and I think they're going to bring in Steven Nelson at some point, because he's not going to get a ton of money, and he's going to get an opportunity here to be a starter from day one. If they can get Steven Nelson in, or if they don't get Steven Nelson in, how many Tums are you going to use on third downs this year?
A lot. It is, I think I agree, the biggest concern. I mean, getting Anthony Harrison in the secondary, the safety, can help kind of stabilize things in general a little bit across the board. When you have the back end stable, it kind of carries over a little bit. But there is concern, and let's face it, even last year with the Green Goblin back there, it's been kind of an up and down year of the secondary, and even Slay had his good moments, but maybe not the kind of moment that you said, yeah, that's why we paid all this money to get this guy in here and to have him as a shutdown corner. So because of that, That is the biggest concern. You have enough of a kind of a mishmash back there. He comes in, I think he can win the spot. I think it's a situation right now where you're concerned across the board, and hence why the pass rush has to be better this year as well. I think that is a concern, and you need that depth, certainly in an era of the NFL where you're playing nickel personnel more, when you have diamond there more, and you've had guys who have not achieved what you hope to achieve. And so that would be my biggest concern going in. And having said all that, Darius Slay has to play like the shutdown corner they hoped he would be when they brought him in last year.
And in the wide receiver room for the Eagles this offseason, they had a mega potential star in Devonta Smith. That's my opinion. I said it before the Eagles ever drafted him. I love the kid. I thought he was the best wide receiver in the draft, and the Eagles maneuver nicely to be in a position to take him, drop back to where they wouldn't have got him, move back up again to get in position and grab him. I'm a huge fan, and I think he's going to have a big first year, and he's already got an ongoing relationship with the Eagles' potential starting quarterback. Because remember, it's a competition, but we know that he's already worked with Jalen Hurts at Alabama. Even though he's never made a play in the National Football League, he's their number one wide receiver. You got a bunch of other guys in that room that are young, that have had whatever opportunities they've had, who want to have this being a blossom breakout type year for themselves. Is there going to be an issue that the new guy who's never made a play, and I know Jalen Reagor hasn't made that many plays, and Fulgham had a great run but then kind of disappeared, and Watkins and Hightower and J-Jaw have all had their varying numbers of chances in the National Football League. Is it a good or bad thing that a new guy's coming in, a rookie, looking to be the number one wide receiver this year? How did the other guys in the wide receiver room respond?
Well, I don't think it'll be a bad thing if he produces, and I don't think they'll have anything to complain about if, as you said, and I agree, Devonta Smith turns out to be as good as we think he is going to be. I think if you're the other receivers in the room, you have to look at this and put your ego by the door and say, okay, let him catch his 12 catches during the game, because if Devonta Smith starts producing like we think he is, think he will, you're going to see more coverage go his way. You're going to see more single coverage of your Jalen Reagor or some of the other Eagle receivers. When you have a star at one spot, it can open up opportunities for you if you're one of the other receivers. And, you know, for a guy like Arcega-Whiteside, it's now or never. You've got guys who have to do something this year. When you have a star receiver who the Eagles obviously did not have last year, you had balance in the Super Bowl years, certainly, and you had a guy like Alshon Jeffrey, who his first year here was tremendous, then it draws attention away from some of the other guys. It also opens up things for the tight ends as well. So I think that's the key. If you're the receiver, you better not worry about whether he's going to catch more passes than you. You better say, hey, this guy getting open, this guy making an impact is going to make me a better receiver, because it's going to change the way other teams cover me and in general how defenses play against the Eagles.
Ed, last one from me. And I want to mention before I ask Ed this, because it is summer beach season, and Ed wrote a book, The First 50 Super Bowls, How Football's Championships Was Won. So I encourage everybody to pick that up. It's a great read. I've read it. So everyone do that. Ed, you've been in this town for almost 2 decades covering pro sports, KYW, WIP. I always say this. I asked Les this. I asked Damo. I asked Nick. When you talk about the Eagles, I'm taking the Super Bowl off the table because that's too obvious. Give me the most exciting moment, the most interesting moment you covered when you were doing the Philadelphia Eagles.
Are we talking in the media room, or are we talking?
Well, no, we're not talking about
that's a whole show for another day.
Yeah, that's a whole nother show. Well, let's keep it on field.
I think the saga that happened a little bit with Chip Kelly was incredible to cover towards the end when he's saying, I'm in charge, I'm not in charge. It was kind of like, let's look back at the press release from the year before where he said he's in charge of personnel. That whole soap opera towards the end where you could see a building. That was when I say it wasn't easy for fans, but it was interesting. As far as games, aside from the Super Bowl run, I think that the last day of the season, when 50 things had to happen, and then they went out and murdered the Cowboys to get into the playoffs and then make a decent run that year to get to the NFC Championship game, including beating the Giants up at the Meadowlands, who were a 2-loss team and a big favorite. That run was fun because, as we know in the NFL, sometimes the unexpected happens. We're sitting there that day at 3:45 making plans to cover the end of the season news conference, and then suddenly you're on a plane to Arizona 3 weeks later. So that's all part of the fun of the NFL, is that you never know what's going to happen. It's a week-by-week drama. As far as what happened on the field, that was one of my more memorable moments when we went from preparing for the end of the year for them in 3 hours to following them all the way to the championship game.
All right, I'm going to take you into the press room, press box. I'm going press box specific. On Sundays, covering the Eagles, game time can range from 1 o'clock and you're eating breakfast to 4 o'clock to a night game. What was the best fare that the Eagles ever put out for you? What was your favorite thing to eat when you say, all right, I know it's good because they're a little predictable at times, but what was the thing that you looked forward to? Hey, I'm eating on the Eagles today. This is not a bad thing. I'm going to enjoy myself.
Well, from what I can remember before it was gobbled up by everybody else in that meeting room, John and I know you better be first in line if you get there. I personally still loved the Sunday at 1 o'clock games.
Yeah,
and getting there.
Oh,
yes. Getting there before the traffic hits at like 9:30. Getting to the omelet station upstairs and having my little egg white omelet prepared with all the fixins and getting my free cup of coffee and just sitting. I never took it for granted. Sitting there, yes, the food was great, but also having my Java, looking over the field 3 hours before game time, thinking, yeah, this is fun. I could keep doing this for a while. We never took it for granted how lucky we've been. But as far as the bill of fare, I would say the fine omelet station would rank at the top, and that's also another reason why I like those 1 o'clock games.
Yeah,
that's right, but I take it for granted. Where's the omelet guy when he's not there? That's my first thing.
And I remember getting some of those omelets and then being vilified by some of my fellow media members when I would put ketchup on it. They'd say, you can't do that. That's a nice omelet. Why would you put ketchup on it? Always put ketchup on it.
Yes, nothing wrong with that. Spices up a little bit, fine with me. Maybe a little bit of the hot sauce, too.
All right, give us a sign-off, Ed. Give us an Ed Benkin sign-off.
On Birds 365, I'm Ed Benkin. Birds 365. Oh, I almost slipped there. See,
I thought he was going to go KYW for us.
Yeah.
I
Almost had
could.
Yeti.
I have to actually see if I can legally do that right now.
We're glad you didn't. Glad you didn't get in trouble. We're also glad that you came on with us today. If you don't mind, we'll tap into you from time to time during the upcoming year. Thanks for doing it,
guys. My pleasure. Thanks so much, and I'm sure I'll see you at some point down the road.
Ed Benkin here with us on Birds 365. All right, we'll come back in just a couple. I got another thing or two I want to run by J Mac. Got a good guest for you coming in hour number 2. Adam Kaplan, who we've had on the show previously, co-host of Inside the Birds podcast, is going to hop aboard with us. We'll talk some football coming up in about 20 with Adam Kaplan here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.